So, well, the end of this semester, Short History of the World, A Story of Humanity. Here we go. As you know, this has all been about humanity in all its meanings. And it has been a story I've been telling, we've been exploring together because I've had to make selections. And no historian, no human can tell the whole history of humanity. Of course, they can't. History is selection. Okay. And if you look at the word history, his story, if you will. So this has been my story. And this is what historians and storytellers do is they make selections, a narrative that they create based on very rigorous research. So this has been the story that we've been exploring this semester and that you've had a chance to reflect on maybe for the first times in your lives. In this kind of very planetary, global way, this new kind of story that is very much inspired by the times in which we live. And that is, we have the planetary view now, or what some astronauts would call the overview effect. That when you go into space and the human mind goes into space, we begin to see something that humans really have not grasped, and that is the whole planet, that there's a story to tell about the whole planet and about humans on this planet. So that's what we've been doing. And we've gone through all of these different chapters. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to provide you with nearly enough detail that I wanted to, just because of the way the semester has gone. You've seen some of the recorded lectures, but at any rate, the principal narrative or overall arc, I think, has been clear nonetheless. And that is that humans have come to this state of civilization in a very short period of time. We have become the masters, if you will, of life on this planet. As more and more that we're heading into space, that there's a great story to tell about civilization and how humans have been winning more and more freedom for themselves. And this is an undeniable thing, and it's something that humans are grappling with, because more freedom means more invention, means faster evolution, and means a lot of unpredictability in terms of what lies ahead in our future. So, what we did last week is we began to look at the 20th century, which is a remarkable period of growth, accelerated growth in human history. And we ended with the Second World War and these two big, very dark forces now in the human story. One is called genocide and one is called omnicide. And I tried to show you that, in spite of all of the growth and invention and progress, if you will, in the early part of the 20th century, it unfortunately resulted in a conflict and war on a much more staggering scale than we've ever seen on this planet. And we saw how possible it is for a great nation of humans, the Germans, to literally, with new technologies, um, uh, orchestrate, plan out the the how would we call it, industrial scale murder of millions of human beings. That's called genocide. Omnicide was when the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan in 1945, that led to the end of the Second World War at last, with the defeat of Japan, but the pummeling of the Japanese cities, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, with the atomic bomb that was dropped as a result of the science that came from Albert Einstein's discoveries of the splitting of the atom, was just a, a moment in history that has unleashed something very new for humanity, and that's called omnicide, which is the destruction of everything. So it was dark, and I wanted to be able to help you to understand that at that moment after the Second World War, particularly, um, when the destruction had been on such a staggering scale, um, that human beings had something very important to face, about what had driven the use of these weapons in the first place, and that is the sort of moral, and ethical lapses. Might even call it, the lack of progress that humans have made, that has led to such intolerance, and the sort of demonization of other groups, whether it was, the Western world demonizing the Japanese demonizing the Western world, Germans demonizing the Jews, or others, or the battles between the European states, France and England, and Germany, and then Russia, and all of them, that became this terrible conflict, the Second World War. This kind of moral, um, problem that humans face, this inability, to, accept diversity, and other humans, and this was a great, um, challenge that we would now face going forwards, to ensure that we would never have war, never have destruction on this scale ever again on this planet. Let me just quickly blow through or blast through a few things that took place leading up to the Second World War that I missed last week. And then I do want to show you some scenes from the Second World War, particularly, with the Holocaust, um, and what Germany did undertake against not just Jews, but many others. So you can understand how organized and how clear the final solution was. It's not a conspiracy. This happened. It's very real. And it's hard for humans to grasp the scale of this planning that went into this, just in the same way that it's still hard for us to grasp that in, 2000, September the 11th, 2001, that that those four planes that slammed into the World Trade Center, and the others in the United States, actually were planned, came out of the mind of a person named Osama bin Laden, living in a cave at that time in Afghanistan. And so it's hard for humans to grasp some of these things. For example, one of the important forces that we were dealing with as well, before the Second World War, was also a great plague that had broken out. And actually, this had happened, just before the end of the First World War. It was the first real great pandemic, that we faced globally. And I wanted you to see this image. So this comes from 1918, during the Great Flu epidemic. So you can see just how close we are to those people back then, because they too were masked at that time, and they too were dealing with, what we had been dealing with in the pandemic, being masked. And the flu, outbreak then actually had a lot to do with the war at the time, as, epidemics or pandemics tend to do when people come together in small spaces. Humans come together into cities, and tighter spaces. Germs get spread more easily. And in the First World War, in the trenches of the First World War, when people were gathered in these small spaces, that's where the flu, pandemic broke out. And it was a direct result of the First World War and the intense gathering of people fighting in small places. One of the things I touched on last week was just how this idea of the totalitarian temptation, or dictatorship, grew even more starkly in the 20th century, leading up to the Second World War. That there was this idea that Joseph Stalin brought, as you can see here in the Soviet Union, Benito Mussolini, who talked about the idea that people are tired of liberty, if you can believe that. But we take our freedoms for granted. But dictators, when they come to power, tyrants, when they come to power, they They're not too interested in freedom. They're interested in their own self-preservation. And you can see Benito Mussolini here when he's, speaking in that very wild way that he did in Italy. He said, men are tired of liberty. We want order, and we want good, pure, simple races of people, all with walls around their countries, so everything is ordered. General Franco in Spain, the same. And then, of course, Adolf Hitler in Germany, who were all bringing this idea to the fore leading up to the Second World War. And that is this idea that I call the totalitarian temptation. That countries and societies, when they are dealing with a lot of unpredictability in their economies, difficulties in migration, and a lot of, let's say, tumultuous changes in their societies, they may reach back for a strong man to save them. And that's what was happening in the Second World War. China certainly did this with Mao Zedong, who rose and took communism, which is not a Chinese idea; it's a Western idea, came from Karl Marx, um, and shaped that into a particularly Chinese version of socialism and communism, but always built around the cult of personality, as Chairman Mao and Mao Zedong, you can see here, did. And we see this today to some extent in North Korea, where this continues. This idea of the cult of personality built around the sort of totalitarian, the man who, the father figure, as you can see, the first North Korean dictator here, and then his son and now grandson, who's currently the ruler. This idea of the total power, um, sort of consolidated in one office, is something that we always have to be aware of. And we can see today, in the sort of comical way this plays out in North Korea. Here we have the grandson in North Korea, studying the latest military plans, and that he's going to decide upon, and the whole country and its economy is built around the military and about the use of weapons, and the sale of weapons. I'm going to come back in a moment to the critical things that happened after the Second World War, but I just want to show you how this idea of the totalitarian, of the strong man, continues on to this day. Look at this. Vladimir Putin, wants us to see him as the bare-chested, strong warrior with his rifle, walking through the country, prepared to defend his people at any cost. Now, what I really want you to be clear upon as we go into the final part of the 20th century after the Second World War is that the idea of genocide, the idea that um, a a country or a society of people could plan out with very powerful technology and execute this plan of the annihilation of others, is a very real threat for us in the world. And it happened um, in Germany during the Second World War, as I mentioned last week, but I didn't show you some of the images I wanted you to see. It begins with propaganda. It's very important that you understand what that term propaganda means. And I just want to stop for a moment before I show you some very important evidence from what took place with the development and execution of the Holocaust in Germany. I just want to stop for a second and see if you have any questions or anything, or am I going too fast with this, or are you following so far? Everything good there? Okay, let me just, excellent. Okay. So, okay, thanks. So take Propaganda we see today in the form of, we might say, slogans. In the United States, Donald Trump used this very successfully. He's a very good salesman. And, stop the steal, make America great again, MAGA, selling, t-shirts and caps and demonizing others. This idea of creating strong advertising, really effective graphic advertising, is exactly what Adolf Hitler and the Germans did during the Second World War. When they began to create a campaign across Germany on billboards, through radio and media, where they were demonizing those that they considered the undesirables. This is Wannsee. Remember, I showed you the Wannsee conference was the video I wanted to actually show you last week. I don't have time to play the important part now, but I've posted it for you in the folder, the class 40. This is the place just north of Berlin, Wannsee, in the middle of the Second World War, where the top brass, if you will, of the German um, forces at the time, Hitler's most senior deputies gathered, and they met for 90 minutes to plan out the final solution. The final solution meaning the solution to what they called the problem of the Jews, or the problem of those people who needed to be removed from German society because they somehow were a threat, or they were the dirty people. And but if you look at this evidence, this is fascinating. This came out of the meeting that took place. To the left here are all the individuals who attended that particular meeting that day, and to the right, this is the critical document. If you look at this, these are all the countries that Germany was occupying or planning to occupy during the Second World War. And then to the right is the column of all the people that they want to remove and soon essentially liquidate, kill, murder. Um, and if you go down to the end of this at the bottom, look at the number. I'm going to ask you all a question. According to this document that the Germans prepared at Wannsee, how many people did they want to remove from these countries that they were planning to occupy or were occupying? And when I mean remove, not deport, I mean kill. How many do you see? Can you write in the live chat? What's the number, the total? I think this is going to come at exactly, Alec. Exactly. Very good. Now I'm going to ask some of you a very honest question, but it's not personal. It's simply, did any of you know that the Germans were planning to kill that many people? Did you always think it was just 6 million? That's the number, right? Exactly. Alec? Yeah, okay. Alec probably know. 11 million. This was the plan. And in this plan, and here come the stark images, okay? So for anybody who has a trigger warning here, just, you don't have to look or look away. I'm going to show you what the plan was, how you kill so many people so quickly. That's what the Holocaust was. This is called genocide. It's planned out killing. You take modern freight trains, you push the people into the trains, you move those trains to places in remote parts of the country. You call them sort of work camps. people going to work? And this is the propaganda that you tell others if ever people start to wonder what's going on in these places. These are concentration camps where people are doing work. No, these are factories of death created by humans. You take chemicals, you put as many humans as you can into cellars, underground or above ground. You strip them of everything that they are wearing. You take out everything from their mouth that might be of value, like gold. All of those naked people are put into a small space. It is filled with gas. Within 30, 40 minutes, the gas eventually kills all of the people. Um, if you wonder what evidence we have of some of this in the concentration camps that you can go and visit today, you can still go to these particular areas, and they will show you, and they can date that in the walls where this happened, there is flesh, there are fingernails. Literally, that it's unimaginable, but it was real. And then what do you do with all the bodies afterwards? Well, you burn them. You just burn them until you have bones. Or if you can't keep this factory of death going for 24/7, then you put them into pits, and you shoot them all, and then you cover the pits with dirt, and then you plow them later and with bulldozers. And if you have some extra time, and you think it might be of value, you take the children and others and you do medical experiments on them. Maybe that will bring you some important medical information. Some students have said to me over the years, "Oh, but the Holocaust produced some important medical information from experiments." I I always ask the students to think hard about how that knowledge was acquired, and also think about whether that knowledge is even of value to humanity. This, moving on, is the beginning of omnicide. This is a rock, and in this rock, out of it can be extracted uranium. And this is the letter that Albert Einstein wrote to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the President of the United States, in which he said that we have discovered how to split the atom, and we think that with uranium, some refined uranium, that together this can be brought together into the development of a new kind of weapon. And this is where the testing of the atomic bomb was done. It was done beneath a football field called Stagg Field at the University of Chicago. This is when the American president, during the Second World War, began a private program of taking this science, the science that Einstein had brought him, and with some enriched uranium brought from the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, always a great supplier of resources, and enslaved individuals for humanity. But in this case, the experiment was done underneath the football field. Alec, did you know this about Stagg Field? Let's see what Alec. No, okay. I thought you might. There it is. This is when the Manhattan Project is just starting. It's when the beginning of the testing is being done that will then lead to the creation of the large scale project in New Mexico that Robert Oppenheimer coordinated, and that is the, of course, topic of the Academy Award winning movie on the creation of the atomic bomb. But this is where the early testing was done underneath this football field in great secrecy. And of course, here is the first atomic weapon. This then would be dropped in 1945 um, on two Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And here is an eyewitness account from Life magazine in just in 1945, September 1945. You will see an account by a journalist who is seeing for the first time what has just happened when humanity has dropped this bomb of unfathomable, unprecedented energy on other humans with the express purpose of destroying as many people and as much property as quickly as possible. I'm not going to read this for now, just because I want to get to the critical part of today's talk and the more positive part. This is just all by way of helping you to kind of see with more images and visualize exactly what I was talking about last week, some of the evidence. But let me just quickly read this to you because, in terms of the legacy of what we're dealing with in the 21st century and beyond, it is the staggering scale of destruction that we humans now have in our hands to unleash on other humans when we wish to use those weapons of mass destruction. And this is unprecedented in the human story. We saw Hiroshima today. Some call Hiroshima, but mostly we say we saw Hiroshima today, or what little is left of it. We were so shocked with what we saw that most of us felt like weeping, not out of sympathy for the Japs, but because we were so shocked and revolted by this new and terrible form of destruction. Compared to Hiroshima, Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne are practically untouched. Those are the other cities in Germany, not in Japan, in Germany, that had been bombed and destroyed by the Allied forces in the Second World War, led by Churchill and Americans and Canadians. And they were massively bombed. Berlin was so massively bombed, it eventually brought Hitler's downfall and his suicide in defeat. And now this journalist is saying what we're seeing here in Hiroshima is much, much greater. Looks like Berlin looks practically untouched. What was formerly Japan's most modern, most westernized city is now nothing more than a 2-foot layer of twisted tin and rubble as you stand in the middle of this 4 1/10 square miles of flattened ruin, gaunt, blackened, twisted trees give the picture of Hiroshima its only source of elevation. Only 10 steel framed buildings still stand. Wow. Think, guys, there'd been a city there. But there's nothing left of them, too. They're just blackened, hollow shells. And like everything else in Hiroshima, they're twisted. The sickly sweet smell of death is everywhere, a putrid reminder of, and it just, I mean, it's an eyewitness account of such destruction. So the Second World War has ended. Fascism has been defeated. It's the end of 1945, and there is immense triumph and joy in many cities, Canada, of course, United States, England, France, Soviet Union as well, not just Europe, but all over the world, because this had been the largest war in human history involving the most countries with the greatest destruction. And the winners looked to be the ones that we wanted to win, which was the freer world, that tyranny or totalitarianism had been defeated. Yes, but let us not forget that the decisions that were taken to use these weapons, particularly the atomic weapon, was an irreversible decision that has left us with a legacy of great suffering and also the question of how do we ensure that these weapons are never, ever used again? Well, we often say that after the Second World War, it's a great dividing line. That before the war, before the end of 1939 to 1945, the world lived in a different era. But now, because of the use of atomic weapons to end the war, finally, it meant that we now had to grapple, we humans, with the power of our machines. It's not just about weapons, it's about what we humans, through our free thinking and our invention, and our ever constant striving for more, we create tools and machines that give us greater and greater power. And so, in a way, when we talk about this dividing line, we're also talking about what we're dealing with today with artificial intelligence. And it's the idea that we create these machines, we create these tools, but we have to be very, very careful how we use them. And the question that was increasingly asked now at the end of the Second World War was, well, what now? We can we stop wars in the future? Can we begin to grapple with the social and racial, divisions, nationalism, and ethnic, superiority that extend all the way back to what you saw when the Europeans came across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas, during the conquest. And don't ever forget what Christopher Columbus and the other inventors and explorers had with them. They had the approval, the 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 permission, even the encouragement of the authorities of the time, the religious authorities, that if the people that they met in these new parts of the world did not become Christian or did not understand the superior culture of the Europeans, they should be considered subhuman or savage, and they should be dealt with in that way. These are deep problems in humanity that go beyond the weapons and tools we create. It's our humanity. It's the way we interact with people who are different. It's our understanding of diversity. And well, this is the beginning of the good news. Does anybody have a sense of what I'm about to tell you that happened as a direct result of the Second World War and its destruction? I've begun to show you a little something here, but I'm gonna take it back so you don't. Does anyone have a sense of what we well, here it is. Exactly, Justin. There it is. That was created after the Second World War by the United Nations. Now, I'm going to put aside the idea that the United Nations may no longer be as relevant today as it once was. That's a different kind of discussion in 2024. Let's go back to 1945 and 1946, when all countries are trying to grapple with this fundamental idea of equality. Equality. You know, Alexis de Tocqueville, in his classic called Democracy in America, which he wrote not long after the American Revolution, and he traveled through the United States in the 1820s and 1830s, trying to understand this incredible thing called democracy that had taken hold in the United States, and he was trying to understand how the French could really make that work in France after their revolution, and and in his book, which is classic in understanding this fundamental idea in human history, the quest for just and fair and equal governance. His fundamental idea was he wanted to understand equality. And he said in it, and this is going back 200 years, it's so prescient, so filled with an understanding of something universal in our story. He said that equality and the desire for equality is something almost innate in the human, that 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 we're striving for this, but in different ways. But that here we were in 1945, 200 years or so, well, 100 years after the Democracy in America had been written, and over 200 years after the revolutions for more freedom began. And we see at last that we are enshrining this idea for all of humanity in a document. It had no powers of enforcement other than the UN's consensus of all countries signing on to this document. But this was the first time ever that any society, not least a global society, had talked about humans being born free and equal in dignity and rights, and they are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Not even in the American Declaration of Independence or in the documents of the French Revolution did you see such a clear, strong statement of equality and freedom for humanity going forwards. And this is something that I I cannot stress is very important in the story I've been telling you, because it's that moment when we are all recognizing that that we must strive towards this freer, more equal world in which dignity and rights are respected. And once this was written down in this way by a body as important as the UN was at that time, it can never be taken back. The world will always have to grapple with and accept that this is what we want. The question is how we will make this happen. Now, I'm going to stop because there's more that I want to say, but I I want to stop because I want to ask you if you watched the Hans Rosling video. Did everyone have a chance to watch it? Okay. I'd like to I'd like to end the class with just a little discussion about what that video is telling us, because it presents, in a way, the evidence for what I've just said. And I wanna make sure you understand that point, and then we can conclude with a little discussion, and we can talk about a little bit more about what's been happening through the 1950s and 60s up until today. But nothing is as important in terms of our future as the, lessons of the Second World War, the, um, the period that we've entered into in history in which humans are grappling with the destructive power of their machines, and this declaration of freedom and equality, of dignity and rights. But let's see what Is anybody ready to jump on their microphone and give us a little bit of sort of summary of what Hans Rosling talked about? What he
Uh,
showed us? Go ahead.
uh, in the video, he was like standing in front of like a graph, and he showed
Mhm.
like all the countries that how they started out with being having low life expectancy. Huh? Oh, sorry. They
Yep.
start off with having low life expectancy and little income, and then over the course of the centuries, they started growing. Each country started like rising in wealth and life expectancy. Some of the colonies started kept were still in the low end, but slowly rose up after the Industrial Revolution.
Good. And so, what is the overall impression that you had of the sort of progress taking place? Did you feel as you watched him present the thousands of statistics and the way that he laid that out with all the countries? Did you get the feeling that there's been some kind of progress going on in the last 200 years?
Yeah, mostly.
Well, I see Alec is saying, but if wealth has gone up, isn't that more of the 1% getting richer as poorer people don't gain much anymore? Well, if you look, Alec, at the poorest countries in the um, uh, overview that he's presenting, you will see that literacy and life expectancy has been rising in those countries too, and that the idea of the 1% growing wealthier and wealthier, and let's say the 99% not, or people are getting poor, that there's a greater divide growing. Um, this is true, and this is a problem in capitalism. But but you can't deny what Rosling is presenting, which is if you stand back and look at the overall story of humanity, of all nations, of the human race on planet Earth in the last 200 years, particularly after the Second World War, what you're seeing is an advancement of people are getting more educated, people are having more opportunities, and that medical science is advancing to the point where life expectancy is getting longer and longer. And the fundamental thing is that the education literacy has been growing worldwide. And that is perhaps the most important result of that data. Let me take a look. But if the data becomes skewed, show that when breaking down, well, it doesn't become skewed. It shows that um, in if you take China, for example, you will see that parts of China that were poorer have become wealthier too. But why that's the case, you might want to question some of the corruption in the system in China, but there's a fundamental point that Rosling is trying to make is that humanity on the whole is becoming more literate, that education is uh, more available. Oh, good points. Okay, let me think for a second. Yeah. Well, then we may have a new problem, Alec, that we have to address, which is that while there is greater and greater access to education, um, it it might mean that the tools that people are using for that education are being abused, or it could mean that the technology that is enabling this access to increase is not being used in the right way, and that's or it but these are good questions to ask, Alex. Alec, I should say there's two here, and I can't quite answer that. What I what I can what I think is important is that we have to at least accept the data that Hans Rosling is presenting, that there's something going on in the larger story, in the human story, that shows that as Alfred North Whitehead would say, that there is a slow sunrise happening, but it's slow. It's slow. Let me stop and see, because I really want to make sure that you all have a chance to contribute if you want, and then we will conclude. There's more I would like to present, but perhaps just for the sake of time, and I want to end this sooner rather than later and get back to marking. I can post for you um, a recorded talk that I gave that will tell you more about the story that unfolded after the Second World War through the 50s and the 60s and 70s, and of course into the 21st century. Because I think Alec is putting his finger on some new problems that we're dealing with. Um, but Alec, as I've said many times, um, progress is a double-edged sword. It's the contradiction of progress, paradox of progress. We have new powers and new problems. All right, so I think I'll leave it at there for now. And uh, is there anything else that you would like to uh, address? I see here. Wow, it's great. Yang Fang. Who's this over here? Oops, I'm gonna just enlarge this. Oh, hi, Maureen. Great. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I am going to post something for you in the next 24 hours, a recorded talk. If you want to see more about the final part of the 20th century into the 21st, but I think it would be better if we conclude. And I really do want to get to your assignments and get the marks done. So sorry about that. Thanks, Alec, for the always important points that you're making, the good critical thinking, and um, I see Alex, Adrian, Amber, Chimney, Erica, Ethan, Jackson. Um, Please keep in mind that I do teach other general education electives. So if anything is offered in the new year for you, either called Global Leader or Humanity's Destiny, you may be interested in those courses. And finally, I'll just throw it back to all of you, to the big cosmos right now. Are you sure all of your questions and anything have been addressed before I save this live chat and Alex good comments and post those in the folder with this recording? Is there anything else? Thanks, Justin. And let me come here I'll show you my face. Very nice, Alec. Read Alec. Here, I'm going to come here for a moment and stop the sharing of this. Okay, and I'll show you. Say goodbye to you. Hello, everybody. Have a great Christmas. But let's end with Alec's good words. We'll go back to a Chinese wise sage, the great philosopher Confucius. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Alec, in Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville talks about, all sorts of dangers to democracy. But if he says that the will of people to strive for something better, if the will is there, then the future will always be better. Once you lose the will, the want for something, then you're in a dangerous time. But so it may be slow, but we have to keep moving as slowly or quickly as we can in the direction of greater freedom, greater dignity, uh, greater understanding of equality, greater respect for everybody's purpose. And I could even share with you all, why don't I do this? One final little quote from somebody. I have to do this, even though we're running out of time. I don't have his picture right now, but I'm going to end it with one of my heroes. Have any of you ever heard of a man named Václav Havel? He was the first president of modern Czechoslovakia when the Czech Republic and Slovakia came together into Czechoslovakia after they had been occupied for a long time by the Soviet Union. And then they were able to defeat the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union ended. Czechoslovakia became an independent and free nation, and it was led by this playwright. He also refused to drive expensive cars. Is that true? Okay, Václav Havel? Okay, it's possible. Let me read you something Václav Havel said about humanity and the future. And if I can find his picture, I may even have it in my. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Oh, yeah, here he is. Here he is. No, that's Darwin. There's Havel. Okay, here we go, guys. This is the way we have to end this course. I'm going to share this. Stay with me. And I'm going to share this. Yeah, here we go. Okay, excellent. So, Alec, who do you see right now? Who do you see right now on your screen? Exactly. Okay. Everybody, he's one of my heroes, this man in front of you. His name is Václav Havel. He is no longer with us, unfortunately, but he was a writer, a playwright, a social critic, and a fierce critic of the Soviet Union when it was occupying Czechoslovakia during the Soviet Empire before it fell. And he was like Nelson Mandela. He was put in jail for a long time because he had fought against the state, the corrupt state. In the case of Nelson Mandela, of course, in South Africa, it was apartheid, the system of white power that he opposed and fought for and was prepared to give his life for. And as you know, Nelson Mandela spent 27, 26 years in prison before he was released at last. And South Africa changed, and he became its first president of a new multiracial state. Well, Václav Havel had something similar. He wasn't fighting against the apartheid. He was fighting against the tyranny of the Soviet Union, of communism. And he survived his time in jail. And when he came out, he became president, led the country in its early years of an independent nation, but he also continued to write. And here's what he wrote for a magazine in 1995 called The Futurist. He wanted to write about what he saw was the years ahead for humanity going into a new century, a new millennium. And he wanted us to understand something about what it means when we say human rights. And here's what he wrote. Okay, so I'm going to read this. It's just a paragraph, and then we're going to conclude. I find these words very meaningful and helpful in and hopeful in understanding what we humans have learned from history. If you hear something in the background, it's just my wife. She's in another room on a call, so I'm going to try and not speak too loudly for her. And here we go, the man, Václav Havel. Ooh, hold on, I have it right here. Yeah, good. I've got it. Let me bring it here. Good. So he wrote this for The Futurist, the July-August 1995 edition, and the article was titled "The Need for Transcendence in the Postmodern World." The need for transcendence in the postmodern world. Just reflect on that word transcendence for a moment, okay? It's so important. Here we go. Yes, the only real hope of people today is probably a renewal of our certainty that we are rooted in the earth and at the same time the cosmos. This awareness endows us with the capacity for self-transcendence. Politicians at international forums may reiterate 1,000 times that the basis of the new world order must be universal respect for human rights, but it will mean nothing as long as this imperative does not derive from the respect of the miracle of being, the miracle of the universe, the miracle of nature, the miracle of our own existence. Only someone who submits to the authority of the universal order and of creation, who values the right to be a part of it and a participant in it, can genuinely value himself and his neighbors, and thus honor their rights as well. Those words, well, let me just come back for a moment. We're just about done. Okay. I find those words profoundly encouraging and inspiring. Have any of you ever thought that your life, just being alive on this planet, is a miracle? And I'm not being religious. I'm not, I promise, okay? Although I am kind of religious, but, have you ever thought that you're lucky to be alive, to experience this thing called life, to go through it, to get better at it, to be a part of it together? You have, Justin? Very good. That's wise. Isn't it pretty neat, Alex? Exactly. And what he's trying to tell us is we humans are part of something very, very big and amazing. You have, Mackenzie? Way to go. I'd like to leave you with those words and leave you with Václav Havel. Again, there's so much I haven't been able to talk about, but this is really the meat of it. This is the beating heart of a lot of what I would tell you anyways, which is that we humans are a lot smarter and a lot luckier than you might realize, and it is a kind of miracle. And if we recognize that in all of us, maybe we'll fight less. Maybe we won't kill each other so much. Maybe we will even be able to love each other more as humans. Maybe, right? Okay. Alec, the Inimitable Alec, who knows a lot of things. Do you feel a little hope in your heart? You feel a little hope? Can you touch that part that says, maybe I'm a miracle? Okay, guys, I got to go. I got to go mark all of your papers. Have a great Christmas, okay? And if you need to reach me for anything, you can always shoot me an email, all right? Take
Have a great
care.
Christmas, sir.
Okay. Take care, everybody.